Welcome to this episode of Criminology Chats, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of crime, justice, and everything in between. I'm your host, JR, and with me today is an outstanding student from the Chicago School Criminology Department, Ashley Arinsado. Ashley, welcome to your first Criminology Chats podcast.
Hi, Professor JR. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Today, Ashley and I will talk with retired FBI Agent Jonny Grusing. He is going to talk about the case of Harold Henthorn. He worked this case with many other FBI agents and a retired National Parks agent, Beth Scott, in the 2012 to 2017 timeframe. I think that our listeners will enjoy this particular case, and we can safely say, I think, Ashley, that he was a very, very bad husband.
Yes. To introduce Jonny, he's a special agent with the FBI's Denver division from 1996 to 2021. For 23 years of his career, he worked violent crime matters that included missing persons, serial killers, federal jurisdiction homicides, and mass attacks. From 2008 up until his retirement, he served as a Behavioral Analysis Unit Coordinator, BAU, for the division. Jonny received extensive training from the profiling unit during these years and employed that specific training in addressing these serious violent crime cases that were happening in Colorado. From 2013 up until the present, he has taught hundreds of seminars on profiling serial killers and preventing mass attacks using the very good BAU principles. He's now Director of Security for the Douglas County School District in Colorado. Jonny now addresses the daily challenges of keeping 63,000 students and 8,500 staff members safe in all 90 schools he supervises. He works really closely with 4 different law enforcement departments, which helps build leaders and mental health support to prevent these students from continuing down violent pathways through a variety of measures. Welcome to the show, Jonny.
Hi, Jerry and Ashley. Yeah, Jonny Grusing out here in Denver, Colorado. Happy to be here and interested to see what we're going to talk about today.
I appreciate you coming on such short notice on our show today, Jonny. And we want to talk a little bit about the case involving Harold Henthorn, if I said that correctly. And just for our listeners out there, he's a gentleman out in Colorado many years ago that killed his wife. And we want you to talk about the case because it's a unique case and probably was a hard case to prove. And talk a little bit about his first wife too, Jonny, because that's some interesting information with his first wife as well.
Sure. So, yeah, I've been assigned to the FBI office for about 16 years or so by the time this case happened. And I was on the violent crime squad. I had worked a serial killer case prior to this. I had worked then. That threw me down the rabbit hole of working other very strange cases in which either people disappeared or it was a murder that was something that wasn't easily solved. So for each of these other ones prior to Harold, I would work with the profiling unit and then with the local detective. In Harold's case, it was a Park Service agent, Beth Scott, and tried to solve something that's difficult. So I had seen in the papers when Toni Henthorn had died, it made the news here. She was local doctor, eye surgeon at Cherry Creek, and she had fallen 150 feet to her death on September 29th, 2012. But we have a lot of people who fall because we have mountains to the west of us and bad things happen in the mountains, and most of them are not criminal. So I had seen it. It did catch my attention, but I wasn't assigned the case early on. Another agent was. And then about a year later, almost, I live in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, and I was down at the local Einsteins with my wife. We were having coffee in the morning, and I see our evidence response team getting ready for a big search. They come to get their coffee for the big search. And I said, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "Hey, you saw the doctor that fell off the cliff almost a year ago?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "We're going to go search the guy's house. We're looking for a diamond." I was like, "Well, that's interesting." They said, "Yeah, we got a search warrant. We're working with Park Service and looking for some other stuff, but we think he might have killed her, but it's not our case." Park Service was running with it. FBI was helping. So again, it was about another year. And the case agent for the FBI had stopped me in the hall saying, "I think that Harold is a serial killer like the guys you've been working on, especially Scott Kimball." And I said, "Well, what makes you say that?" He said, "Well, not only did Toni, the doctor, fall off a cliff, but a car fell on his first wife 17 years ago. And it was a really screwy ordeal. They were on a mountain road. A Jeep fell on her and killed her, and Harold got away with a lot of insurance money. It was ruled an accident. We can't prove this one is a homicide either, the doctor falling off the cliff. Plus, the most interesting thing about Harold is he disappears every Thursday. And by disappearing, I mean that he goes to a job that doesn't exist. And he's been doing that for 20 years. I said, really? And he said, yeah. He like leaves, he gets a babysitter, he dresses up in a coat and tie, pretends like he's going out west to, for us, it's Utah or Grand Junction, and that he's going to either build churches or do fundraisers. And he's been doing this for 20 years, and we ran his wages, and he doesn't make any money. So our surveillance guys have followed him around on Thursdays. He just doesn't really do anything. But anyway, I said, well, looks like you've got some homework to do. And to the agent, he's like, we're working on it. I said, well, good luck. Let me know if I can help. So the prosecutors, again, this is 2 years after Toni's death. It was actually a little less than that, but they asked me to come help and see if I could help push this case a little bit forward. So I met with them in their office, and it was two U.S. attorneys, Valeria and Sunita. It was Beth Schott, who's the Park Service agent, and it was Dana Chamberlain, who is the auditor. And I'd known Dana for a long time. She was FBI prior. She's probably been with the U.S. Attorney's Office the same time I've been with the FBI. And she told me that Harold had stacked life insurance policies on Toni. Do you guys know what that means? Ashley, can you guess
Yeah.
what that means? What do you think that means?
The life policy.
Yeah, he stacked 4 life insurance policies on Toni.
Oh, well, I don't know about this. I thought you were meaning stacked like first wife, life insurance policy, second wife. I thought you were talking about that, but
But that happened too. Very good. Yeah. So, yeah, when the first wife died, Dana told me this. He had about $600,000 in life insurance on her. Both were under USAA, the car insurance, and she had to die in a car accident. So it was very interesting that a Jeep fell on her and they ruled that a car accident. With Toni, though, they got married in the year 2000, and he took out 1.5 million in 2000. He took out 1.5 million in 2005 when their daughter was born. He took out another 1.5 in 2008 and another in 2010. So that's $6 million of life insurance. And stacking is actually illegal. So if we're married, you and me, Ashley, just pretending here, and I take out a life insurance policy on you, it's a 20-year policy. When we get to year 15, it's okay for me to cancel that policy and start a new one that's a new 20 years, right?
okay.
Because it's about to expire in 5, and while you're fairly young, I get a new one. And you can do the same for me. That's what normally happens. All I have to do is I check this box on life insurance that says no other policy remains in force when I take this new one on. That I'm canceling the old one, starting the new one. But there's no check on that. Like life insurance companies don't call each other, they can't, to see what policies are in force. So instead of canceling these policies every 3 to 5 years, Harold was stacking them. So they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So I've now set the table for you guys. You have 2 things going on with Harold. You have him faking a job, right? Every Thursday, and now you have him stacking life insurance policies on his wife. So things aren't looking good for Toni, right? So they being the U.S. attorneys asked me to hike with them up to the site where she fell and said, if you look at this site, then you will see that this is a homicide. I'm like, okay, I'm happy to go. So, and it's fun as an FBI agent to get paid to go for a hike. Okay, you don't have to sit behind your desk all day. You get to go up there. So we put on our hiking gear. We hike. It's called Deer Mountain. It's right in Estes Park. The reason why the FBI was working it with the U.S. attorneys and Park Service is that's national land. So it's just like a federal prison. It's federal land, so we have jurisdiction. So it's about a 2-hour hike to get near the top. The trail is very clearly marked. Have you ever hiked before, Ashley, or no? On a
Yeah,
mountain?
yes.
So
You
yeah,
crossed the limit.
oh yeah, very good. So
Yeah.
yeah, this trail it's the small gravel, and it had, the railroad ties on the side to where it's the big wood. It was just
Yes.
very nice trail. But what Beth taught us when we get near the top is that Harold had gone off trail. He took a hard left. If I were to show you a picture of it, it's just straight pine trees and pretty dense forest. So you're walking up and down over a lot of fallen trees and in and out of some creek beds, up and down over some hills for about 20 minutes. And you can get lost pretty easily off trail, especially in a dense wooded area like that. So Beth took us to the lunch spot. And at the lunch spot, Harold had taken a bunch of selfies there of him and Toni. Toni's dressed in a pink shirt, hiking shorts. Harold is a longer blue button-down shirt and a white shirt underneath, and just selfies of them smiling, having a great time. But what was really interesting about the lunch spot is Beth pointed down, and it's at about a 50-degree decline going straight on, not straight down, that's 90, but it's more than a 45, and it's really jagged rock to where they're like 3 to 4 foot boulders, but they're, like I said, jagged, so that you have to step on one, sit down, step on another, and you have to go back and forth. It was a rock field. It took us another 20 minutes to go over this rock field, and you can twist an ankle very easily on something like that. It's dangerous. So Beth had told us up there, Toni had had 3 knee surgeries by now, and this was supposed to be their anniversary. So if we pause for a second, this couple is Harold's 56, Toni's 50. She thinks they're going up for a nice hotel and meal for this day. They have dinner reservations, and Harold instead has taken her on a hike up a mountain, which her knee can handle that, but going to the rocky scree, that's hard for her. And that's what Beth had asked her family about. So they go down over the rocky scree to an actual cliff, and this cliff overlooks a vertical drop of 150 feet to where if you step one more step, it's a straight fall. And Beth, we didn't get to look over the edge because it's too scary. We had to go to the side and look at it because none of us wanted to accidentally trip and fall over the edge. So she said, yeah, this is what we call the push spot, is where Harold had taken multiple pictures of himself and Toni near there. The closest Toni would get to this cliff is she would put her knees up against, there's kind of a little small ledge there that's about a foot tall. She put her knees against the ledge, but she would not stand on the ledge. Toni had taken pictures of Harold actually standing on the ledge. I don't know if you've seen the movie Titanic. It's old. It's got Leonardo DiCaprio in it, but he stands on the front of the boat and he puts his hands out to the side like he's flying. Very dangerous. And that's what Harold was doing. It looked to us from the pictures like he was trying to coax Toni to stand on the edge. We don't think she did. But anyway, that's the last picture of her was on her knees. She goes over the edge. Beth took us down to get from the top ledge to where they recovered Toni. 150 feet down there takes us about 7 minutes because there's a little natural trail that goes around. And she showed us a tree bench that's about 6 inches in diameter that Toni's head had impacted. Toni had hit the side multiple times going down, but the tree branch had caused an avulsion. Have you heard what that means yet?
No,
I
not at
hadn't either. So I was 30 some years old, so don't feel bad when I heard this. But an avulsion means a tearing away of the skin or a scalping. So the tree branch had taken off 6 inches of
all.
her head. Yeah.
Oh,
So Harold had taken her by her jeans, as he told both the ranger and family, pulled her out of the tree by her jeans. He said her head was bouncing on the rocks as he laid her down, and then he tried to give her CPR while they called 911. Harold's timeline was off because when they were at the top of the hill, that was at 5 o'clock. One of the last pictures was Toni's knees up against the ledge. That was at 5 o'clock. And then Harold standing doing his spread arm thing was between 4:45 and 5. So he doesn't call 911 until 5:54 p.m. and it's or 5:55. At 5:54, we were able to show this later. His phone actually comes on, and a soccer text comes from the nanny. Their daughter Haley was 7 at the time, and the soccer text said Haley won 5-1 and gave all the smiley faces. So the problem for Harold was the initial story that he told the ranger was he didn't see Toni fall. They were at the ledge. Toni was trying to get a picture of him, and he looked at his phone and saw the soccer text. And when he looked up, Toni was gone. Okay, so that should have been around 5 o'clock if you're tracking with me. But he doesn't actually see the soccer text until 5:54, and right after he sees the soccer text, he calls 911. So do you remember how long I said takes you to get from the top to the bottom for us to hike down there?
roughly 20 minutes.
20 is really pushing it.
20.
Super slow. It's 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 7 minutes to get from the top to the bottom. And we did it a second time and we really hustled. You can actually do it in 5. If my wife had fallen over the cliff, I probably would have done it in 5 minutes, hustling. Okay. So now what's the problem with his timeline? You have 5 o'clock pictures, you have 5:54 for the soccer text, you have him calling 911 at 5:55. What did I tell you was Toni's big injury from the tree branch?
Her
Yeah,
evulsion. That
yeah,
one.
avulsion, very good. The coroner said she bled out from the avulsion, but it probably took her, and she also died from a broken neck, a punctured lung, and a broken or a punctured liver. There's one other thing that would have been fatal, but it was primarily the avulsion because by the time they took her to collect her, she had actually no blood inside of her body. She had a half cup of blood because Harold had purposely or accidentally put her head downhill and her feet uphill. Okay. So time of death, she goes over at 5. She might have survived till 5:15 to 5:45. That's her window that she could have lived. But she was alive when Harold got down to her, when he pulled her out of the tree. And then he doesn't call 911 till 5:54. Having Beth explain all that, I know that's a lot of time, but her walking me through that, it's obvious it's a homicide because we all were married, all 5 of us there, and we put ourselves in that situation. If our significant other falls over, we are down there, we're calling 911, we're panicky. All of Harold's 911 calls, he was very precise. He gave GPS coordinates of where they were. He said, I need a rescue helicopter. He said, price is no, or money's no object. He said he was giving CPR. So let's stop there. Would you be giving CPR to someone who's bleeding profusely out of their head?
Absolutely not.
No. What would you be trying to do?
Put something to stop the bleeding
There
out
you
of them.
go. Yeah, you'd want to stop the bleeding and you would sound panicky. You would not sound under control to where you're giving GPS coordinates and having a helicopter come pick you up. Harold actually made a mistake on there because he goes, I want you to know exactly where I am. What's the problem with that statement? If you're calling for rescue, who's in trouble, Harold or Toni? He used the pronoun I. I want you to know where I am. And yet it's his wife that's dying there on the side.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Like he's prioritizing himself.
Omitting his wife, who's the one who should be the center of all this.
Exactly.
Yeah, so all that stuff did not smell right at all for me. And that's where they were, but Harold lived in a Christian community here in Highlands Ranch. He did missions for Cherry Hills Church. He taught in the church. All his work was supposedly building churches. So none of his friends wanted to think he could be responsible for 2 wives' death, much less one, or one, much less two. So they being Beth and the prior agent had tried to interview these Christian people here, and none of them wanted to think he was possible, could possibly do that. I had been in some interviews before to where, especially with our serial killer, this guy seemed to be a good guy, and nobody thought he could be a serial killer either because they let their kids play over there, or he, would hang around with them, and then they're like, nope, can't be him. But the other thing, Ashley, that I found out is that there had to be a way to figure out what he was doing on Thursdays, right? Because he wasn't making any money, faking his life. So I looked through the file, and when I first became an agent, they assigned us cases. That's what they're called in the FBI. If you get you get what's called a new case assigned, and it can be from the public calling in, law enforcement, whatever. Someone else is doing a record check, and it looks like there's a federal crime. So my first case was the same bank had got robbed twice in Aurora, 2 weeks apart. And on the first one, a bigger guy came in with a ball cap and sunglasses, hands a note to the teller, and then gets the money and runs away. Okay, so we had a lot of bank robberies happen. But then another guy comes, he's smaller than him, but same get up, hands the same type of note. It had unique lettering on it because the teller had been robbed 2 weeks prior. And she's like, that's the same handwriting, but it's a different dude. And this guy had run to a U-Haul truck. The U-Haul truck had a picture of a stork on it because the teller was intrigued that somebody else would do it again. She went out and saw the truck. And then she reported to the FBI that a stork truck might have taken him away, a U-Haul truck with a stork on it. But however, that case had been investigated and closed. So when I first came on, I was brand new. I was so excited to get a bank robbery case. Those were my first 2 cases. And I looked through it's called a serial. It's every time somebody types up something like you interviewed the teller, she saw the truck, that's a serial in the case file. And each of them had like 10 to 20 serials. But I found that a different agent taken it on himself to go to a U-Haul place, the closest one, and get a list of 4 people who had rented a U-Haul truck. And that had just sat in the file. And so I look at those. I have our dispatch run those 4 people. That means run for criminal history. One of them had been arrested for robbery before. His name's Jason. And so I get a picture of him. He looks like the bigger guy that came in the first time. And sure enough, within a couple of months, we end up arresting Jason and Bruce. They were out of Massachusetts running from the bank robbery. But that was my first case, and it taught me like you need to do your homework. You need to really investigate everything in your case because that one had slipped through our cracks. And I thought about that when about Harold and his Thursdays. So I got our case file and I just digested everything in it. And what I found is that there were some old cell records for Harold that had not been examined. Ashley, I'm guessing you have a cell phone.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. That
Okay.
was a good guess. But the way that, and you probably know this now with law enforcement, the best way to know what someone's up to is for us to get a search warrant for your cell phone
Yes.
because it shows us who you're talking to. But more importantly for Harold, it's where he's been. That's called cell site technology. And that had not been examined. And it was not in an easy form to examine. It was a bunch of long numbers and decimals. It wasn't like 123 Main Street. It was 0.004, 0.666, and then you'd have to go to an answer key to see what that is, and then the cell tower. So it was a 3-step process. But I was able to start charting out where Harold had been on his Thursdays in the year 2012. So again, this is 2 years prior. The first place that like January through July, because again, Toni was killed in September. Every Thursday, he went to Aspen Grove Shopping Center. I went and knocked on all the doors at Aspen Grove. I found out I had a picture of Harold that I would show, and nobody knew him except a manager at Panera. Her name's Christine. And she goes, that guy was here at least once a week. And he would pretend like he's working. He would order food, he would go in the back and he would sit there for 4 hours. It's like he didn't want anyone to know he was here. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so she told me all about she dealt with Harold all the time. He would pay in cash. So she said it was just a screwy deal, but he'd been doing it for years. Like, okay, so instead of building churches, he's going to Panera. But then I wanted to see what he did after that, and he would go to a cabin up in Granby, which is a good hour and a half away. I knew that he had a cabin, but it looked like he would go to Panera, go to the cabin, come home. And so I got his routine. That's what he's doing on Thursdays until it was mid-August. I saw him start going up to Deer Mountain. So that is where Toni was pushed off. And he went there on August 16th. It was the first time, and he hit off the tower. It was the same tower, actually, where that 911 call came in, where he was saying, I'm trying to do CPR, somebody get me a helicopter, all that stuff. So I saw him up there before, and he had never told the cops that he had been up on that mountain. He said the reason why we went from the lunch spot down to the cliff is because Toni saw turkeys. And her parents hated that statement because they're like, Toni grew up with turkeys. She would never follow a turkey down a rocky thing. And then he changed it to deer. And then he changed it to Toni wanted to have sex with me. And, he would change it to whatever person was in front of him. But it was Toni's fault every time that they just happened to be on the trail. Toni wanted to get private with Harold. So that's why they went down there.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question too. Didn't he tell one little story that that they were going to walk in a more level area at some point in time? And then he changed at the last minute and he decided to take her to this trail that they actually went on that deer trail instead of a more level one and a shorter one? Or did I?
Great point, Jerry. Yeah, because he was wanting to fit, and people like Harold, they want to fit their story to what they know law enforcement's going to ask. And he knew that we as law enforcement would figure out Toni had a bad knee, and climbing that mountain and going down to that awful cliff couldn't be her idea. So yeah, he said that they wanted to go to Bear Lake. Bear Lake Canyon, it's even has a handicapped trail all the way around it. It's very sloped, very level. Everybody, all of Toni's friends and family would believe, yeah, she would go to Bear Lake, no problem. But then he said that was too crowded, and it was Toni's idea that they should go to, Deer Mountain. And then it was Toni's idea that they should go off trail, and then Toni's idea they should go chase some turkeys or deer. Yeah, good point. But yeah, so once we had that first cell site hit on August 16th, I started looking for more, and I would see that Harold started turning off his phone, which he had never done before. It would like start going north from his house, and then I would see a 4-hour gap of time. And then I would see him coming back down from the park. So that was trip number two because he's trailing from it. And then I would see an 8 hour gap of time. And then I would see a 12-hour gap of time. It's like he was searching harder and harder. Every once in a while, he would turn on his phone, ping off the tower, and then turn it back off. I wasn't a cell phone expert, but to me, the data was pretty clear that he was testing it in there. Plus, on I believe it was trip five, where I think he found this cliff because that's when he called the Stanley Hotel, which is where they stayed in Estes. And that's when he called her work to say, I'm going to take her on a surprise trip on September 29th. You need to clear her schedule. He also called a Jeep company to order himself a brand new Jeep Cherokee. And he said money's no object. So those calls were all made, I think, right after trip five.
And I have a quick thing to interject there just for Ashley, too. That hotel that Johnny mentioned, you can take tours there where they say it's haunted. Just thought I'd let you know the Stanley Hotel. Sorry, in Estes Park. Thought I'd throw that in. They do have
Oh, that's
tours.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the movie The Shining is based on. It's a really old horror show with Jack Nicholson where it's a haunted hotel. But my brother-in-law got married up there. We didn't stay in it that night. We just came and went. But some people there said they heard stuff banging around inside their room and junk like that. So it's supposed to be a truly haunted hotel. That might be the most interesting thing I'll tell you today. I don't know. But so I ended up actually finding 9 premeditation planning trips. Times when Harold would leave his house, he would tell a story like he's going to go on another church trip or something like that. And he would go either ping off the tower or be in that area. So that totally debunked that it was, like Jerry said, it was Tony's idea to get off the flat trail or Tony's idea to go after turkeys. So that was the premeditation that the U.S. attorneys wanted. And what we needed now were some storytellers. So we wondered, why would Harold kill Toni? Because he had been living off her. She was making 200,000, let's say, as an eye surgeon. Her family had oil money. They were probably bringing in 3 to 400,000 a year, and nobody suspected he was faking his job. So why would he need to change it? Why would he push his wife off a cliff? And he's supposedly a Christian man who had his first wife die in a horrible accident. And he's got a daughter. So everything seems to be going well for him. Well, I get some people to start talking, and the team had already known about this before, but it looks like Toni stood up to him 1 year prior in 2011 because Harold controlled her completely. And by controlling, she couldn't, when parents would try to call her from Mississippi, her phone would come through, the phone number would come through to Harold, and Harold would answer the phone when her parents would call. She was not allowed to have Wi-Fi at the home. Like babysitters would come and say, "What's your Wi-Fi?" And Harold would say, "No, we don't have Wi-Fi. Toni doesn't need it." Can you imagine talking about that to about your wife who's a doctor? No, Toni spends too much time on the internet. We don't need Wi-Fi here. And so, I mean, people that came just like, wow. And she came into the marriage very, I would say, outgoing, healthy, but year after year, they said she just started shutting down because of his control. However, in 2011, the Cherry Creek eye surgeons offered her to become a partner. So she could go from doctor to partner. She would make almost twice the money, maybe, but more if it's a status thing as well, if you're a partner with a surgeon. Harold said no. And he said no in front of their church friends, in front of their close friends. They had arguments at the Chili's over here. And it got really uncomfortable because Toni was finally standing up and saying, "Yes, I'm doing this." So Harold's like, "Let's go to the cabin." Remember, the cabin is where he retreats to, and it's his secret place. So Toni had been up there a couple times, but not she, of course, didn't know that's where he was hiding out all the time. When they get to the cabin, its back deck overlooks a lake. This is 10 o'clock at night. Harold walks her out on the back deck. Their daughter is 6 at the time, Haley. She's inside. And Harold says, "Toni, one of these lights is broken on the edge of the deck. It's down there near the lake. You need to go pick it up." So, and this is what I ask when I teach my psychology classes on this. I ask the kids, I said, "Okay, how many of your moms would go pick up the broken light, if your dad told them you need to go pick that up? Would your mom go do it if your dad told her to?"
Absolutely not. I wouldn't even go do it.
Yeah, I mean, Toni told her mom later, because after this, you imagine Toni walking down the steps. Her mom, Yvonne, said, "Why did you do that?" And she said this, which is very dangerous. "It's easier to do what Harold says than to argue with him." Are you in a bad relationship at that point? Yeah, but Toni couldn't get out. So she walks down the stairs. She starts picking up the glass. A beam falls on her head. And we still don't know today what exactly the beam was. We call it the beam incident. The best thing we can guess, because I actually went out there and took pictures, nobody had done that yet. I found some 2 by 6 by 8s. And those are big pieces of wood. But that beam hit her right on the very top of the neck. It fractured the top vertebra, and more importantly, it damaged her spinal cord. So she had to wear, like what you have put on a dog for a surgery, those white cups. She had to wear that around her office for a couple of months, and she was super embarrassed. And she would give excuses for Harold. Toni's parents, after that, after she gave them that answer, it's easier to do what he says. They said, he's not getting any more family oil money. You take him off our checks now. So that's $100,000 a year. That was what Harold said he was making to everybody else was $100,000 a year. So what they were in essence doing is snipping that line of money. And Toni agreed to it. She's like, okay, I'll take him off. But it took her a couple of months to get the courage up, all the way to July. Actually, it was June of 2012. Within 2 weeks is when Harold started his trips up to Estes Park.
That
So,
all fits together.
yeah, so what do you think killed her then? Why would Harold kill Toni after what I just told you? She stood up to him. He drops the beam. She survives. It takes her about 6 months, but she goes and cuts the checks. So why would that be motive for him, though?
Wait, I have a question. So
Sure.
when he originally told Toni to go pick up the light,
Yeah.
was maybe an attempt to like maybe kill her? Or
That's a great question. Because dropping a beam on your wife's head probably won't kill her, but he is lucky it didn't just incapacitate her. And, then he's having to take care of her for the rest of her life because she's paralyzed or something like that. Our
okay.
best guess is she said she moved her head at the last minute forward. She thinks if it would have hit her on the head, it would have killed her instead of the neck. So we don't know is the bottom line, but you just asked a question that we ourselves struggle with, like why a beam and then why that? So
Or would you just say like instead of these situations are more like attempted, is it more just kind of domestic violence examples?
yeah, yeah, I think this wasn't a form of attempted homicide because Harold did not put, and Toni could tell you this, and so his first wife, Lynn, he never put hands on her like
Okay.
a domestic violence sort of incident.
Okay.
So we believe her standing up to him meant as a warning and then cutting off the finances. To Harold, that meant cutting off Beth called it this, his persona. That is the person he invented, that is successful, that builds churches, that makes 100,000 a year. Because once she snips that 100,000 a year, he's going to have trouble explaining the problem with finances. So as we're doing this, I'm also looking into the prior wife. The prior wife's name was Lynn. They got married in 1984. They were happily married, young couple here in Colorado. They lived east of here. Lynn was a social worker. Harold actually did have a couple of jobs before he started faking his work. He worked at Colorado Christian College and he was a fundraiser. It's a pretty easy job. I mean, if you're looking for a job outside of school and you want an easy one, raising funds for a Christian college is pretty easy because all you do is you go to people who have already donated and you say, would you like to give again? And they say yes. You've still got your job. It's pretty easy. I talked to his boss and she told me that their renewals were drying up. They didn't know what Harold did all day. They had some talks with him, and especially at a Christian school, they're like, how do we address this? Because we don't think he's doing anything. They eventually fired him. In 1993, it was the first person they had to fire. And instead of going home and telling his wife Lynn he'd been fired, he said he got a promotion and now he's building churches. And he made himself his own business cards, and it was called RDS, Resource Development Services. And he would come to work and flash money around and talk about how much, he's making and whatever. So he started faking that job 2 years before Lynn's death. So that's when he started his Thursday stuff. Lynn starts getting sick at work. She's bleeding internally. She fainted a couple times and she's going to have surgery. So A, Harold's going to have to pay for expensive surgery. B, she's not going to be working. What's the problem there since he's faking his job?
Oh, there's no source of income.
No source of income. At least with Toni, you had her own doctor money coming in besides the oil checks. Now with Lynn, he's got nothing. So that's when he took out that second rider on the USAA policy to say she's got to die in an auto accident. He moved it from 300,000 to 600,000. And then they go for a drive and they drove to the mountains and Harold pulled over to the side of the road. He said the tire is mushy, which I still hate saying that because it just sounds creepy to me. They pull over back in and multiple people pull off to help and he waves off the help. He goes, "No, I got this." And next thing you know, he's waving down the Montoya family from a van. The Montoya family is Patricia, Ted, and Carlos. They have just come from a lake in the mountains. He waves them down. They're like, what's going on? And this is 10 o'clock at night. And he goes, "I told her not to go under there. My wife is under the Jeep." I'm like, what? They go over there. Lynn is face down, and stories vary a little bit, but the most of the Montoyas say she's face down, still under the Jeep, with the weight of the Jeep on top of her back. So the tire had been taken off. Have you ever taken a tire off a car yet?
Oh, absolutely not. We'll never do that
Okay,
either.
you won't after this story.
Exactly.
But yeah, you jack up the car, and then you take the tire off, and there it's called the brake disc assembly. It's a really sharp rotor that's steel, and that thing was laying on Lynn's back, as was the whole weight of the Jeep, because the whole thing had fallen down on her. So a lot of pressure on her. And they look at Harold and going like, "What are you doing? Why wouldn't you get this off of her?" And he's like, "I told her not to go under there." Now let's pause for a second. What's similar in the two stories between Lynn and Toni? Whose fault was it that he and Toni got to the edge of the cliff? His or Toni's?
Oh, it's all his fault. And
Yeah.
another thing that I'm realizing is that it all occurred when they were just alone. Like, so did
Very
he
good.
call the Montoya family after the fact that she
They were
passed?
just driving down the road.
Yeah, it all happened where he was the only witness to these two incidents.
Mm.
Correct. Remember, I told you he was waving people off? Some
Yeah.
people were stopping. It was very isolated. When I say in the mountains, yeah, it's like 15 minutes past the closest town, which is Sedalia. So it's way back in there. And a couple people just driving on this road are like, "What's a Jeep doing out here? They must be in trouble." So they're good people. They say, do you need help?" And he's like, "No," until he stands out in front of the road and waves the Montoyas down.
Clarify. So when they come and talk with Harold, she's already dead.
Well, here's what happens. So they get the Jeep up off of her. They pull her out. They turn her over. It's only 30 some degrees outside. The ground is cold. Ted looks at Harold and says, "We're going to give her CPR. It's cold. Can we put your coat underneath her head to give her some warmth?" Harold takes two steps back and says, "This is a new coat." Yeah. And then they go, "Okay," so they get some trash and put it under Lynn's head. They start giving her CPR. He says, "Don't touch her." They say, "Look, buddy, you asked us for help. We're helping her." Patricia went, but that was days before cell phones. They went, had a store owner called 911. She comes back. By the time she comes back, Ted and Carlos given Lynn CPR. She had started breathing. And Patricia was there to witness when she took her first breath. She looked at Harold and she said all the color drained from his face. He was not excited. He was terrified. And as the sirens came at the same time, she goes, "It was the exact opposite reaction of what someone should have if their wife might make it." However, Lynn didn't make it. She died from the trauma that happened inside of her. She suffocated basically under that Jeep. They got her to breathe a little bit, but she didn't make it to the hospital. Now, since people almost saved her, right? So Harold did get $600,000. It took him 5 years to find a doctor and an oil family like Toni. I call that predatory, and predatory means you're hunting. And so Harold hunted on Christian websites, and he would find someone who would let him be the head of the household and control of the money, yet they would make all the money. So that's why it took him 5 years to find Toni, right? Because she did those two things. She didn't care about money because her parents had a lot of money, and yet she would make all the money. So she was the perfect target for Harold.
With Lynn, I read a few things too about Lynn, and the actual initial police that showed up there, they actually did a pretty good job, I think, of taking some photographs because they took some photographs and they found a footprint that where it would have been placed if you wanted to push the vehicle off of its jack. but nobody, and they also took some, I think, prints of his shoes, but I don't think they ever got a comparison or what that would prove, even if they did. And he gave a story that they used a boat jack, not the Jeep jack, because the Jeep jack wouldn't work, and even after he lubricated it and put oil on it, and they found no evidence of oil being on the jack.
Great points. So yeah, Ashley, for your jacks, a good jack will have a clamp that holds up the car to where, it'll grab this and not go side to side. A boat jack is spherical. So if you stick a sphere underneath something, it's going to be very unstable. And that's what Harold had stuck underneath the axle of the car, was basically a sphere, and it was super unstable. Again, Len was face down underneath, so the whole Jeep is resting on her back. And Harold had told law enforcement and the Montoya family she was going after a lug nut. So nothing about, if you've ever seen a car jacked up, to A, to go underneath it, but B, to go underneath where that really sharp rotor is, after a lug nut, it makes no sense to anybody. But Harold said, I told her not to go under there. I took the wheel off the tire and I went to throw it in the back of the Jeep. And when I threw it in the back of the Jeep, it must have knocked the boat jack over and the whole car fell on Len. So it's
And
Len's
if that
fault.
really happened to somebody like me with my significant other, I would be like totally guilty. I would be like just horrified. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't probably talk to me. I mean, I would just be in shock.
The
Yeah,
tragic event, you can't even process it.
yeah. But where did the blame go, Jerry? Whose fault was it when the law enforcement showed up in the Montoyas?
It was Lynn's fault.
Just
Yeah.
like it was Tony's fault to go after the turkeys, to go after the deer, to want to have sex with Harold, it's
And I,
all their fault. And I saw this as a pattern of behavior, not only here, but in child killings when parents would kill their children, in that they are afraid that if they take even 5% of the blame, that opens the door for more and more blame to come in. So you will see them blame everybody else. I told her not to go under there. She's going after a lug nut, the tire, the jack. I mean,
Like the blame.
yeah, because just like Jerry said, if it was my wife, I would be going, what was I thinking? I shouldn't have had her out of the car at all. Even if it's not blame for you to take, you take it when your wife dies and you're on scene. And yet these killers don't know that, and they're afraid of it because they're afraid if they start taking a little bit of blame, they're going to take more and more. So that's really, and I applied what I saw with Lynn and Tony to other future homicides. It works every time. It's always the spouse's fault. It's always even the child's fault. They'll say, "Oh, the child ran away." Really? But you're responsible for the child. So,
yeah.
and then there was the shoe print, and I do talk to investigators about the shoe print, like you said, Jerry. So the shoe print was on, you had the tire taken off. It's the wheel well that covers it. Right on the back side of the wheel well, actually, there was a big old footprint. And it looked like a footprint from a dress shoe. And you also have the cops having Harold put up his shoes and they take pictures, and he's wearing dress shoes. And the tread on them is squiggly, just like the squiggly tread on the tire, on the tire cover. Wheel well is what they call it. But they don't go any further with that. And what we tend to do as investigators, you've heard of tunnel vision. Have you ever heard of that phrase? Yeah. And we get that way if we think this is the simplest explanation. This is what happened. Harold is there. I call him, he's a psychopath and he's Machiavellian. Psychopath means he's lost the ability to feel emotion because Harold had to do what he did to Tony, to do what he did to Lynn. You can't treat loved ones like that and be functioning well, physically. But Machiavellian means you manipulate other people and you get people to do what they don't normally do. By now, Harold, when Douglas County showed up and the Jeep had killed Len, he had been telling people about a fake job for 2 years. So he had a lot of practice fooling people. And so the tears, the manipulator, Harold was one of those people. They said that when you come into the room, he's just like, boom, he's lights on. He's like, he's the storyteller, mover and shaker. So yeah, he manipulated, and the cops did. They did good investigations, but they didn't compare. You had the same type of turkey, deer, and want to have sex stories as he had with Tony, as he did with Lynn. If we were going to the restaurant, we were coming from the restaurant, the lug nuts. He would change the story a little bit every time. He would call it like the seminary people from Colorado Christian College that had hired him and thought he got this. They knew they fired him, but he was saying he got a promotion. But he would say, my bride is gone. My bride is gone. Pray for me. Pray for me. And yet, then 17 years later, when Toni dies, they get these texts, my bride is gone, my bride is gone, pray for me. It was spooky to them because it was the same thing they had heard word for word years and years later. Actually, Harold was attracted to pretty women. Let's just put it like that. And when I interviewed a lot of these women from Cherry Hills, who he tried the grief, he would throw the grief card down. I'm a single dad. I need help. Can you teach me how to parent? Sure. And he would say, well, then come over to my house. And so then they would go to his house alone and feel super uncomfortable because he's controlling them and trying to get them to buy into his grief and all that stuff. And it was one by one, and then he would meet groups of women and they called him Creepy Harold. As I tell my kids in class, if you have your antenna up and you're listening to that, the hair on the back of your neck and the things that say there's something off about him, some women at the church had it. And they're like, nope, I'm staying away from that guy.
Correct.
So I just want to make one more point here, Ashley. If you apply what Harold learned with Lynn, the Montoya family almost saved her. Do you remember that? They were doing CPR, they got her to breathe. He was terrified. He thought she was dead underneath the car. To collect life insurance, she's got to die. If she would have lived through that, plus the scarier thing is she would contradict his story most likely. That she went under there to get a lug nut. Lynn was a smart woman. She's not going under a car to get a lug nut. That's why when his face turned pale, it's for multiple reasons. It's his lies would have been caught if she could open and tell a story, and then all this insurance is he's going to be exposed as a fraud. So let's go back to the cliff. Toni falls over at 5 o'clock. Harold gets down there at 5:07. He drags her out of the tree, puts her on the decline where her head is down. I don't believe it's an accident to where she could bleed. They call it mulch. She could bleed into the mulch there, and it would suck up all her blood. So he's there at 5:07. He doesn't turn his phone on until 5:54 p.m. Why? Why does he wait from 5:07 to 5:54? That's 47 minutes or so. What do you think he's waiting to happen to Toni?
Oh, just die. Because he's trying to play off as an accident, so he's not really going to do anything.
So yeah, no. And again, the coroner said she might have lived 15 minutes, 40 at the most. So that's an awful, and we're hoping she was unconscious the whole time. But based upon the Montoyas almost rescuing Lynn, Harold's got to wait for her to die because there's now $4.5 million. It's not 600,000. It's a huge amount to where if the Rangers get there too early, he doesn't get any of the money for Toni. And of course, she would say, what? What do you think happened on the top of the cliff? Do you think Toni actually stood up there? What do you think happened?
She was pushed off.
We think so too. So Toni, if she could ever speak, would say that my husband pushed me off the cliff.
Exactly how Lynn would have done.
Yeah, exactly right. So the one last thing, and I'll wind up here, is the diamond. I think I told you that they were looking for the diamond in the house.
Yes.
So when Harold got to the bottom of the hill that night, it's after midnight, two church friends are waiting on him, Jack and Steve. Because after he called 911, he called Jack and Steve because it's a 2-hour drive and said, hey, can you guys come get me? I think Toni's not going to make it, etc. So they drive all the way up from Highlands Ranch. It's there. And the ranger talks with Harold, with Jack, and Steve to say, look, we're going to be up here all night. Is there anything of value? Because we're going to make sure no animals get to Toni, etc. And Jack said, yeah, I told Toni to wear her wedding ring today. She never wears it because she's a surgeon. But with this being her anniversary, I said she needs to wear it. It was actually 2 days prior. And so I'm pretty sure she's wearing a ring, and that's a huge diamond. And what I tell the kids, the college students, when I say this is I think Harold pooped his pants when Jack said that. Just because I like to say pooped his pants. But I know that Harold did not want him to speak because he mentions this phrase multiple times later. He says, if only Jack hadn't said anything. Now, we had a gemologist look at Toni's prongs because the diamond was held up by 4 gold prongs. 2 of them were twisted to the side because she had hit the rock so hard it had bent the prongs. And it was, bloody, the hand, etc. But the gemologist said because the way the prongs were bent, the diamond would have popped loose. So it was just either sitting there or it was loose beside Toni because of her, again, hitting the rock so hard. Now, Harold didn't say anything when the ranger asked, after Jack said that, he didn't say a word. Once they got home, though, he told Jack, and because people started asking questions, he's like, we need to go back and get the diamond, find the diamond. And they're like, no, the Rangers are going to do that, whatever else. He goes, the whole reason the FBI is involved is the diamond. So for a whole year, Harold was focused saying that the diamond, the missing diamond, was the reason he was being investigated for killing Toni.
So once again, it's the FBI's fault this time, though.
Yeah, FBI and whatever else. Harold actually snuck back up on the mountain and planted the diamond back on the scene. He had moved, he made a little circle of dirt and put the diamond to where the tip is pointing out of it. Our evidence team found it months later, right before, as a year before trial. But right where Toni's body had been, a circle's cleared out, the diamond's sticking up out of it. What's he doing? Why would he do something like that?
Oh.
That's fascinating behavior, is it not? That someone that he thinks he truly, I think Harold thought if they find the diamond, they'll leave me alone. He knew that him not saying anything to the ranger that day was really bad because he had the diamond, right? So he wanted to make it right. What I think in working multiple people like Harold, especially compared to a serial killer, my serial killer had killed a minimum of 25 people. He probably killed 45 or 50 and got away with it every single time. I mean, he was very intelligent, very scary, but he was good at what he did. Harold, not so good. Harold was good at misdirecting people, but not so good at, this sort of thing. So I think that when Toni went over, he takes her out of the tree, he sets her down, he sees the diamond. He's still waiting for her to die in those 20 to 40 minutes. Remember, where her blood's pouring into the ground. And I think that's when he takes the diamond. So just like we talked about, to where if a killer takes even 5%, they're afraid it's going to open the door. If Harold would have said, "Here's the diamond," and the ranger asked him, "Well, when did you get that?" What's he going to open? He's going to open the door that he was waiting for his wife to die, because that's when I believe he got it. And he didn't want to get stuck on there. So, and you've been in this situation where you don't know what to say, and you don't say it for like 2, 3, 5 seconds, and then it's just better not to say anything. So Harold was not prepared for the diamond question, and the jury just thought that was fascinating, and so do I even today. That he would take the effort to go all the way back up there and plant the diamond. So we did have the diamond as an exhibit in the jury. We present our whole case to the jury. Our witnesses were fantastic. Toni's parents, the people that were knew about the cabin and built it. All those, the Montoya family with Lynn, everybody who he told stories to on the side of the mountain, the dispatcher, the rangers, the evidence came in very well. The one thing they wanted to see, and I had to go get it back out of our evidence locker, was the diamond. They said, "Can we see that diamond one more time?" So it caught the jury's attention as well. Like, that is just so fascinating that he would complain about that being the problem of the case, that he would go plant it again. So there you go. What other questions do you guys have?
Going through everything, so he was convicted, so that was kind of the end goal. But what do you think that, like, if you could have done anything differently, would you have?
I had the advantage of coming in late on this case. So it's hard to say. There's a lot of cases that I got assigned early on, to where when you're in that putting puzzle pieces together phase, that you wish you could have done things differently. Beth, the Park Service agent, had done all the hard work. There's been quite a few documentaries on this, and I equate it to a mile race. You've seen them, to where they do the relays and hand off the baton, except Beth ran 3 laps around, and I just run the final lap, because she had done all the hard search warrants and, did all the interviews, etc. I was just able to help with getting our witness, yeah, and the cell phone stuff and, stuff like that. So one thing I did that I really helped, that a lot of investigators don't do, is I would go to the prison twice a week and listen to all of Harold's phone calls, because he has no privacy when he's calling from the prison. And it's a lot of work, because you actually have to go in the prison, go sit in the lieutenant's office, manually go through all the calls. But they were just fascinating, because just like Jerry said, he said the same thing about my bride is gone, when Lynn died and when Toni died 17 years later. When he would talk to 3 people in a row about the trial, about what's going on, about his daughter Haley, about Toni, it was the same conversation 3 times in a row to 3 different people. So it's like everything about Harold was fake. And so I looked at his letters and stuff like that. So when Haley finally turned 18, so Haley has changed her last name. She's in a good spot now. She's an engineer at a college, and she's actually done her first documentary. She was phenomenal on that. But when she turned 18, Harold writes her ever so often. Most of the time when he writes, it's about trial and it's injustice and I shouldn't be here and whatever else. But on her 18th birthday, it was a very sweet letter. And it said, Haley, you're 18 now. You're such a wonderful human being. I'm so proud of you. And 18 means all these, things. And we're like, wow. Because the family would send me copies of the letters even years after Harold's conviction. They look up his letter. They look up the first two sentences. It's AI for when your daughter turns 18, word for word. And so the whole letter is what to say to your daughter when she turns 18. It's just AI.
Which emphasizes the fact that he's a psychopath because he can't even put genuine feelings to say
Yeah,
a happy birthday card for his daughter.
right. Very good.
I read an article in a psychology magazine preparing for this, and a psychiatrist who did not examine Harold at all, but based on what he read of the case, he thinks that this was not a premeditated murder, that this was just a murder for convenience. And of course, I'm going to be the first to say I'm not qualified to say this. I'm not a psychiatrist, but I don't think this was at all a murder of convenience or spontaneity. It was to me planned. He finaged how many times he went up there to the police, even initially to the Rangers when they asked him, because he said, I'm not familiar with this area when they were talking to him initially at the scene. And based on the previous problem with his wife, to me, as you're probably going to laugh at this, but this to me almost fits the mold. I say, if there is one, a mold of a female serial killer, because most female serial killers kill loved ones for one of three reasons, right? Maybe for money, power, or revenge. I
Hmm.
know that sounds crazy. He's not a female, but it almost fits to me what I've read about female serial killers and why they kill.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Very interesting.
And he's never talked. He didn't do an interview or anything like that with the police, I don't think, in this case, did he?
No, he was represented right away.
No, so he never confessed to anything. So he's still like,
No, as I tell, when I talk on this, you could sit Harold in a room with a mirror. We could say, Harold, nobody's listening. You need to say what happened because it's good for you. And he would say, well, I told Len not to go after the luck nuts. The board just, oh, and by the way, on the cabin, he said he was flinging wood off the roof at the time that Toni got hit. And you're not on a roof at 10. Harold's not a handyman, so then he changed it from that to plywood fell on her, and then there's no plywood down there. And then he changed that to a beam fell on her, and so we finally stuck with the beam. But it's just like all of his other stories. Anyway, no, no way today he could ever say it, even going through the trial, etc.
We asked Johnny about Harold's background as a young man, childhood, and here's what he said about that.
Girl that dated him in high school, because some of his friends knew him all the way going back. And she said that Harold, he became a Christian, said he wanted to follow Christ, like at the end of his high school. And he started doing Young Life and things. And it seemed like he was going to be a new person. But even then, he was dating this girl, and he would say that he's going to come pick her up. And then he said, my mom and dad got in a fight, and I had to get in the middle of them. I had to break it up. And just these fantastic stories. So she said the stories started early. We knew he hated his dad, called his dad an alcoholic. His dad did die when Harold was mid to late 20s, which is really interesting to me because I have another guy that I'm investigating for killing his wife. And that guy's dad died, and he hated his dad. And
mm,
both died in their sleep. So Tony's family thinks that Harold probably had something to do with his dad's death. So that's just one of those mysteries. I'm like, yeah, that's
yeah,
interesting, but I can't go down that rabbit hole.
exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, good
Good
to know.
question.
Do you know if he had any type of head injuries or any type of sexual abuse or anything like that as a
No,
child
no,
that you could find in his background or anything
no,
that came out trial on the defense side for that, saying
no.
any of those things to try to explain away his sociopath tendencies or anything like
And
that?
and narcissism. I mean, he
Well,
had
narcissism, big
yeah,
time.
there's actually we have the profilers had what they call the dark triad. It's a triangle that you draw, and we already talked about being a psychopath. Like, and everything's on a 1 to 10 scale. You can be somewhat psychopathic or really psychopathic. And I put Harold at like 8 psychopathic compared to Scott. He's not up there, but high. Machiavellian, we talked about, that's a manipulator. I'd put Harold near a 10 on a manipulator because he got, like, think about those cops at Douglas County. They show up there. It's like, what? And he skates away with freaking murder and he gets 600,000 for it. That's a manipulator. But at the very top of the triangle is narcissism. And I tell my students that's the most dangerous out of the three, which you wouldn't think of it. But if you are truly narcissistic, you do not care about other people
Mm-hmm.
and you only care about yourself. And that's Harold, man. I would listen to his phone calls, and it's all about him every single time. The 911 call was about him. When Tony's dying, he forgot to, like I told you, he forgot to even mention she was there. It's like, come get me off this mountain. And I think when Tony stood up to him and said, I want to be a partner, that's what killed her. It's
Mm-hmm.
like he didn't have to kill her. I mean, she's this wonderful human being. She's a mom. He's got $400,000 a year coming in. He had everything except he had a wife that stood up to him. It wasn't even close to Lynn. Lynn, of course, just got sick. That was circumstances. But Tony stood up to him, and that was her death sentence. So that's why narcissism is so freaking dangerous.
And to wrap up, we thank Jonny for being here today and telling us about Harold Henthorn's case. It's very interesting, and I learned so much from it.
And I want to add that Jonny has a book being released through Amazon in mid-August of this year. The title of the book is The Devil I Knew, Unmasking a Serial Killer. It's a true crime novel and based on Jonny's 15-year investigation into the serial killer Scott Kimball. Kimball was an FBI informant in the early 2000s who was reporting murder-for-hire cases while he was secretly making people disappear. The book delves into the principles learned from the FBI profilers and reveals 15 years of interviews with Kimball. Jonny includes in his book extensive conversations he had with the victims' families too.
Criminology Chats is brought to you by the Chicago School. For more information about the institution, please visit www.thechicagoschool.edu. I would like to extend my gratitude to the students who participated in this episode.
We want to hear from our listeners, so please email us at crimpodcast@thechicagoschool.edu. That's crimpodcast at the Chicago, CHICAGO, school, SCHOOL.edu.
This podcast is produced and edited by A.M. Peters with additional post services provided by Audio Photo Synthesis. I'd like to give a special shout out to her because if it wasn't for her, this episode and all episodes would not be possible. So thank you so much, Amy. I'm J.R. Rainbolt, your host, and I eagerly anticipate you listening to our next episode. Be safe out there.
The views and perspectives shared in these recordings are intended solely for informational purposes and do not reflect the official stance or policies of the speakers or the Chicago School. Any commercial products and manufacturers mentioned are included for informational reasons only and do not imply endorsement or approval by the speakers or the Chicago School.